Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. My name is Megan Wynn, and I'm the Community Events Manager at the Peninsula Open Space Trust, and I'll be your host for tonight. So, welcome. You're watching Beavers in the Bay, How Nature's Engineers Benefit Our Ecosystems, hosted by Post, featuring our special guest, Dr. Emily Fairfax, who I will introduce to you very soon. Beavers are truly remarkable creatures with the power to transform landscapes in ways that benefit entire ecosystems, from creating wetlands that support biodiversity to helping mitigate the impacts of drought and flooding. These animals are nature's ultimate ecosystem engineers. As we face the challenges of climate change, beavers give us plenty to chew on. Their work can help shape a healthier future for our watersheds and communities. I'm excited for us to gnaw into some more knowledge tonight with Dr. Emily Fairfax, who's here to share insights on how beavers are making waves in restoration. Tonight's presentation will be interactive, and we encourage your participation. To ask questions in the live chat, please log into YouTube. We will address your questions at the end. And for the best viewing experience, you can watch directly on YouTube or click full screen if you're on the Post website. The recording will be available on YouTube immediately after this event ends. During the live chat, please follow the community chat guidelines so that we can create a positive and inclusive environment. So we ask you to please be kind, share no harmful speech, foster constructive discussions, please no spam or self-promo, and we reserve the right to remove any inflammatory comments. All right, moving on. For those of you who are new to Post work, we are a nonprofit land trust, and our mission is to protect open spaces on the peninsula and South Bay for the benefit of all. We are creating a network of protected lands where people and nature connect and thrive. Since 1977, Post has protected over 87,000 acres of land. Here's a short 30-second video on what we do.
Since our founding in 1977, Post and our partners have preserved the peninsula and South Bay's sweeping landscapes.
These are the places we know and love.
Places that wildlife call home.
Places we rely on for food, fresh air, clean water, and our health.
We're just getting started. Post protects nature because nature sustains us. Nature connects us all.
When Post protects land, we continuously think about how to restore and improve habitat for both people and wildlife. While Post has not specifically worked on projects to reintroduce beavers in the Bay Area, they have been showing up here over the last few years on the peninsula and South Bay. Like other conservation groups in this area, we are both excited and curious about how it will all play out. Beavers come with many benefits and also present some challenges to our area's currently built environment. I mentioned before and in the title that beavers are nature's engineers. That's because beavers are the original experts in process-based restoration, a method that focuses on restoring the natural processes that support healthy ecosystems. Beavers instinctively build dams, which create wetlands that support biodiversity and help recharge groundwater. Where beavers are absent, scientists often use a tool called beaver dam analogs, or BDAs, to replicate these benefits. BDAs are human-made structures that function like real beaver dams. They help slow down rivers, recharge groundwater, and create vital wildlife habitats. And Dr. Emily will also tell us more about BDAs and how they work a lot later. At Post, we have been implementing similar process-based restoration techniques in our projects. In 2023, we partnered with the San Mateo Resource Conservation District and NOAA to install engineered logjam structures, a type of BDA, along a restored floodplain in Buono Creek in Pescadero on the coast. These structures enhance habitat complexity for native fish species and help reduce downstream flooding risk in Pescadero. As you can see, here's an aerial view of an engineered log structure and some downstream of Buono Creek, as well as extra log structures downstream to introduce more of that stream habitat complexity for fish. This is an example of how Post uses these tools to balance ecological health with community needs. And Post is also collaborating with the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority to restore Coyote Valley, where BDAs might be used in reviving floodplains. These floodplains are essential for reducing downstream flooding and creating valuable wildlife habitat for the South Bay. And thanks to all our supporters for making our work possible. You can learn more about the work to restore habitat by visiting some of the links in the YouTube description box, and we'll also email this out at the end. And there's more beaver knowledge to come. You can learn more about posts in general on our website at openspacetrust.org. We host many free events like this, a webinar, as well as many others, share free resources like our hiking guides, if you're ever looking for a recommendation on where to go on the peninsula and South Bay. So check out the link in the chat. Before we dive into the program, I'd like to offer a land acknowledgement and invite you to share what native land you are currently occupying and tuning in from in the chat. The land and post working area includes the territories of the Amamutsun, Muwekma Ohlone, Ramaytush Ohlone, Tamyan Nation, as well as other native organizations and individuals who are descended from the first people of this land. These lands have been home to many native tribes since time immemorial, and its people are still here with us today. I want to acknowledge the land itself, including the Santa Cruz and Diablo Mountains, the San Francisco Bay, and the Pacific Ocean, as well as all the watersheds and ecosystems that make up this landscape we call our home. So I'm seeing folks type in the chat. Keep them coming. A lot of folks from Ohlone lands, Amamutsun. Thank you for being here. Let this moment serve as a reminder that as residents of these places, we have a responsibility to be caretakers of our shared home and neighbors, including wildlife. All right. So, folks, I have a surprise, fun, interactive activity for us tonight. It's time to play the Beaver Basics Quiz Game Show. All right, folks, are you ready to play? Here's how this is going to work and how you can participate. You'll need your phone or your laptop to open a new tab, while you can scan this code on the screen or visit at the very top of the Beaver. You can see a website and with the code, or enter through the link in the chat. So go to menti.com and use the code 83719287 and log in. I'll give it a few moments for folks to log in. This is a super fun part of the game. This is how we, when you're watching in live, can participate. And we're going to prime your Beaver knowledge before we jump into the special talk. And you can scan that QR code, type in the link in the chat. And if you're watching the recording, we missed you live, but you can still enjoy and play along quietly to yourself. If you don't want to log in, that's okay too. You can just type directly into the chat or just play out loud to yourself or in your living room. So many ways to engage tonight, and keep logging in. I'm going to keep moving so we can keep this program going, but you can always join in the middle of the stream, so don't worry. Okay, I'm going to give it 10 seconds, and then we're going to get started. I hope you guys are enjoying. We have lots of Beaver content for you tonight. Okay, here we go. You can, again, once we keep going, you can join at any moment. First question: how many species of beaver are alive today? Is it 1? Is it 2, 3, or maybe 4? Oh, all right. We got lots of people entering in live. 2's in the lead. All right, 3, 4. It's moving pretty quickly. I don't know what's happening here, but let's see. Okay. It's pretty even. Okay. Has it settled yet? Nope. Let's get those answers in. I'm going to, in 5 seconds, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're going to show you that correct answer. If you answered 2, you are correct. Let me explain why. There are 2 living species of beaver, the North American beaver and the Eurasian beaver. North American and Eurasian beavers are visually nearly identical and both engage in the same ecosystem engineering behaviors like tree cutting, dam building, canal digging, lodge construction, and so much more. There is another animal found in Northern California called the mountain beaver, but it's not a true beaver because it's on a different evolutionary branch and does not engineer ecosystems like true beavers do. So kind of a trick question, but if you answered 2, like most of y'all did, you did good. Here we go. Again, if you joined us late, you can join at that code at the very top or scan this code for the next question. Here we go. Question number 2. What is the typical weight and record weight of an adult beaver? Is it typically 10 to 20 with a record of 40, typically 20 to 40 with the record of 85, typically 40 to 70 with the record of 110, or typically 80 to 100 with the record of 130? All right. I didn't even finish reading the question yet, but y'all eager beavers are out there answering. So that's good. It helps me get track like how we're doing with this latency. Okay, lock in those answers. So most of y'all think it's about 20 to 40. Okay, that's good. What about? Don't go with the crowd, y'all. Think about what you think is the right answer and go with that, because maybe the crowd might be wrong. So here we go. A few more questions. Let's see if it slows down. And then I'll give it 5 more seconds, and then we're going to go to the next one. Here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. If you answered typically 40 to 70 pounds with a record of 100 to 10, you are correct. I'm sorry. See, sometimes it's worth going the road not followed. Here we go. Beavers are slow growing. It takes them about 3 years to reach an adult size of 40 pounds. But unlike some animals that reach that size, they stay about the same weight for the rest of their life. And beavers continue to grow and put on weight as they get older. So typically an adult is about 40 to 70 pounds, with older adults being heavier. And the record was found in Wisconsin with the record of 110 pounds. That's a big, big beaver. All right, question number 3. Here we go. True or false? 50% chance you'll get this right. Beavers thrive in desert ecosystems. True or false? Oh, okay. We got a lot of people thinking that's true. I've never seen a beaver in the desert. I don't know. What do you guys think? Have you guys seen a beaver in the desert? Maybe they're there. Maybe they're not. Let's keep going. Keep answering those questions. I'm going to give it a few more seconds for y'all to lock in those answers. And here we go. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you answered true, you are correct. Oh, I'm sorry, folks. The beavers are able to transform just about any environment into their preferred wetland habitat as long as they have a little bit of water and some green plants to eat. And that includes deserts. Beaver populations are thriving in the Mojave Desert of California. They're in Las Vegas, Nevada, Phoenix, Arizona. They're in Utah, Mexico, Texas, and so many more places. And deserts with limited woody trees, beavers will still build their dams out of cattails, reeds, mud, and stones. So very, very good engineers. They'll build anything. Build a dam about almost anything. Here we go. 4th question. What animal is pictured here? Is it a muskrat? Is it a beaver? Or is it a nutria? Here we go. Let's see what your answers are. It's pretty even right now. But lock in those questions. You guys are doing so good. I'm really proud of the group here. So let's keep that energy going. Remember, take your best guess. But is it a muskrat, a beaver, or a nutria? We got a few more folks. I'm gonna wait. I'm seeing all these answers come in live. Okay, we'll give it 5 more seconds. Here we go. Ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you answered nutria, you are correct. Very good, everybody. Nutria is an invasive species from South America and look a lot like beavers, but there are some key differences. Nutria have a round, not tail, rat-like tail, and they have a dense white whiskers on their snouts. They're much smaller on an average than the beaver, about 10 to 20 pounds. And remember, we found out the average are 40 to 60, right? And it's surprisingly common for news articles about beavers to accidentally use a picture of a nutria since they look so similar. So make sure we're not getting catfished by nutrias out there. All right, last question here. Here we go. Beavers have a unique adaptation for carrying things underwater. What is it? Is it A, a pouch on their stomach that can put things like mud, vegetation, and small stones in while they swim? 2, they only need to use their tail to swim and have all four paws free to carry sticks and other building material? Or is it that they have a second set of lips behind their teeth so they can carry things in their mouth without getting water in them? So, is it an extra pouch? Or they only swim by their tail? Or they have a second set of lips? Which one is it? Lock in those answers. This is your last chance to participate in the quiz. So, hope you are enjoying that and learning so much. I'm going to wait a few more seconds for more folks to lock it in. But here we go. What adaptation do you think beavers have created for carrying things underwater? Give you a little hint there. Underwater. Okay, here we go. 5-second countdown. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Lock in those answers. If you answered that they have a second pair of lips behind their teeth, you are correct. Because beavers spend a lot of time living underwater, living in water, and have developed multiple interesting adaptations to make things easier, including a second lip behind their teeth to keep water out of their mouth, nose, and ear flaps to keep. And they also have third eyelids that act like goggles. So these adaptations, plus their extra dense fur, make beavers almost entirely waterproof while they're swimming. All right, everybody, give yourselves a round of applause. That's the end of our quiz game show. You guys all did a great job, and appreciate you all tuning in live. Hope you guys learned something, and there's so much more to learn. All right, let me get off the stage here and get back into the beaver talk. One moment. All right, that's better. Okay, so let's get the show started, shall we? I'm going to introduce you to our speaker tonight. Dr. Emily Fairfax is an assistant professor of geography at the University of Minnesota. Her current research focuses on the ecohydrology of riparian areas, particularly those that have been impacted by beaver damming. She uses a combination of remote sensing, modeling, and fieldwork to understand how beaver damming changes these landscapes and on what timescales those changes operate. You can learn more about Dr. Emily Fairfax's research by following her on Instagram at Fairfax Beaver Lab or visit her website, emilyfairfaxscience.com. Let's welcome Dr. Emily to the stage. Hey, Dr. Emily, how's it going?
Hi, Megan. How you doing?
Good. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Before we dive into the main content, can you tell us about how you got into science and specifically what sparked your fascination with beavers?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have always been super interested in science. And one of the stories my family likes to tell is that back when I was just 3 years old, I told my mom I was going to walk on the rings of Saturn, but I would be careful and bring my car seat. So I've always had this eye for science and sort of tried to figure out where I fit into that world. And it wasn't until I was actually working as an engineer myself and saw a documentary about beavers. So I had not been totally feeling my job, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And lo and behold, on the TV right there is my path, all about beavers. Could not stop thinking about them since that moment, just sitting there. And so I decided to quit my job, go to grad school, start studying beavers. And it's been about 10 years and I have not looked back.
Well, that's amazing. I'm so glad that you're here with us today. And I'm so glad that you mentioned TV because I definitely remember watching shows like Planet Earth and any National Geographic documentaries that show up on TV. And that sparks my fascination of just learning so much more in a way that I would never be able to see unless I traveled to those places. So very cool. All right, last question before you jump in. Can you tell us a little bit about what you'll talk about today? A little sneak peek?
Absolutely. So I'm going to be talking about beavers, obviously, and there's a lot to that, as you guys probably picked up from the pop quiz. So we'll go over the beaver basics, Beaver 101. We'll talk about what exactly beavers are doing in California, and then how they are helping us in the struggle of climate change. And of course, we don't just want to take. We also want to give back. So I will touch on ways that we can help beavers too.
That sounds so amazing. We're so excited. So a reminder to our live audience, you'll need to log into YouTube to participate in the chat and ask your questions, which we will get to at the end. But you can go ahead and ask the questions as they come up. So we'll save them and ask them at the end. All right, Dr. Emily, let's get your slides up. That's enough for me. Take it away.
All right. Thank you so much. So, title of my talk today is Beavers in the Bay, How Nature's Engineers Benefit Our Ecosystems. Like I said, I want to start off with Beavers 101, the dam basics. So beavers are well known to be nature's engineers. And what you're seeing here is a picture of a pretty typical beaver wetland. You've got the beaver's dam on the left-hand side. There's a lot of different kinds of plants here. There's water that's moving fast. There's water that's moving slow. And for a really long time, this is what almost every waterway in North America looked like. But unfortunately, that is not what a lot of them look like today. Instead, they look a little bit more like this drawing I've put on the bottom left-hand corner. They're simple. It is like a little ribbon of water just snaking through the landscape. A lot of the times the water is sitting really low. It's not connected to the floodplain. It's really just not looking super good. It's not healthy. And this is a degraded river. And unfortunately, in the American West, we've lost about 50 to 90% of our wetland area, including wetlands along rivers. So that's what we're left with, these just little sort of water noodles, and it's not an ecosystem. This is a challenge for us. In many ways, we need to fix this. We need to get it back to being a healthier river, but that takes time, that takes money. Luckily, beavers don't care about that. They see a habitat like this, and they are like, awesome, let's build a dam. So as soon as that beaver builds a dam, it's going to start to slow the water down. Now, slowing the water down is not the same as stopping it. Beaver dams are leaky structures. Water flows through them, over them, around them, even under them. So even though it's not stopped, it is being sort of backed up a bit. And when it backs up, it helps reconnect that stream to the floodplain, reconnect it to the land around it. It lets the water seep out into the soil, start to wet it. It's like watering the garden. And suddenly all of those riparian or creekside plants can grow again. Now, beavers are not going to stop with just one dinky little dam. Busy as a beaver is a phrase for a real reason. They are going to expand it. They want that dam to be taller. They want it to be stronger. They want it to be holding back even more water. So they're going to make it bigger and bigger and bigger. And they're not necessarily doing this because they're like, oh, I love making huge amounts of water storage for people. They're doing this because they are incredibly awkward. So a beaver, as we've learned, is going to be anywhere from 40 to 70 pounds on average when they're an adult, up to 110. And that is 40 to 70 pounds shaped like a bowling ball with webbed feet coming out the back, little hands on the front, and this huge paddle tail sticking off the rear end. So when beavers are walking on the land, they are semi-aquatic rodents, so semi implies that they can go on the land. It's really not a walk. It's kind of more of a waddle. They're very vulnerable on land. They know that. Evolution's taught them that. And so they're doing all this building and making all this aquatic area because for every single ounce they are awkward, they are many, many times over agile as long as they're in the water. They are safe in the water. They are outstanding swimmers. A beaver is going to be able to hold its breath for up to 15 minutes underwater, and they can outswim just about any predator. So beavers are doing this work to keep themselves safe. Now, all this building is using trees. It's using branches, it's using stones. They have to venture out into the landscape to get those materials. And over time, they're going to have to venture further and further. Instead of waddling through the rest of the fields and the forest to find their preferred building and food materials, beavers have figured out a way to do that safer too. They don't just build dams. Beavers also dig canals. So these animals will go out and then with their little hands, they just dig. And they dig little pathways that go from their home ponds across entire valley bottoms. And these fill with water like little micro streams. Now for the beavers, this is their highway system. If they're out getting trees or getting materials and they feel nervous, they can jump in the water in the canal and swim home super fast. They don't have to waddle. They can take the freeway. And there's not traffic usually on these freeways, unlike California. I've lived there, I know. So this is something that's really great for the beaver, but it's also really great for the landscape. We've fundamentally changed it. It's no longer just sort of this dried out piece of land with a tiny little stream cutting through it. This is now a sprawling ecosystem. This is a thriving wetland. And this is really, really valuable, not just for the beavers, but for a whole host of other species. Now, if you were going to visit a beaver pond in the field, you would see something kind of like this. We've got the beaver's dam on the left-hand side of your screen, and that is the structure that they're building to hold back water. To the right of that, that's the beaver's lodge. So common misconception, a lot of people think that beavers live in the dam, but they don't. They live in a lodge, which is a completely separate structure shaped like a little dome house. Usually this is in the middle of the pond. Sometimes it's on the edge of the banks. And within that lodge, they have these little rooms, and in those little rooms, they groom each other. They sleep in a big snuggle pile. They eat their food. It's very cozy. It's truly like a little cottage, very sweet. And looking at this, you might think, okay, well, I see how beavers are making a difference in the land. We've got the dam ponding water, we've got the lodge, there's some beavers in the back cutting trees, digging canals. But when we think about beavers, and when we think about climate change, and we think about wildfire, and we think about really big challenges, this might not feel like enough of a change to the landscape to matter. It might feel like the beavers aren't really making that big of a difference. But they are. So yeah, you have these single beaver ponds, like this one that's just on the backside of Yosemite National Park. You've got that lodge in the middle, you've got the pond all around it, you've got a wetland ecosystem that's been built up. But they aren't just building one dam. I mentioned they like their dams to be taller, stronger, etc. What I didn't mention is that every beaver family is going to be building and maintaining somewhere between 5 and 15 dams. And that, with enough beavers, can fill your entire valley bottom. So this entire mountain pass, this entire mountain valley has been completely engineered by beavers. And it didn't take that many beavers to do it. This is the work of probably 5 families. So a family is going to be anywhere from 2 up to maybe 8 to 10 individuals. Not a ton of beavers have engineered an absolutely enormous amount of land. And that's really where their power lies. So I want to take a little step back. I mentioned that those pictures I just showed you were from the backside of Yosemite Valley. So what is the deal with beavers in California? If 10 or 15 years ago, someone had tried to talk to you about beavers in California, I bet that there's a good chance people would be like, I don't think there's any beavers here. Or maybe they're just up in the mountains, but that's it. But beavers really are quite present in California. The question is, are they native to California? Do they actually belong in this state? Well, I said they are there now. That is objectively true. This is a map of beaver sightings on iNaturalist, the community science platform that lets people log when they've seen signs of beaver, including dams, lodges, canals, but also the beavers themselves. Quick shout out to iNaturalist. This is a super awesome tool. I use it all the time in my research and really do rely heavily on observations from folks like you. So we've got these beavers all over the state, but do they belong here? And the answer to that is yes. So I don't need you to read everything on this little tiny handout that I'm showing, but it's a piece of the story from a paper that a bunch of scientists put together about 10 years ago. And what they did was they found that beavers have lived in California for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. When we look at all the different parts of California, Northern California, Central California, the Bay, Southern California, there is so many different kinds of evidence showing that we had beavers there. There are museum specimens. There are old dams. There are radiocarbon dated sticks going back 5,000 years. There are place names for beaver. There are accounts from trappers. There are accounts from indigenous peoples. There are all sorts of different pieces of evidence showing us that beavers were all over California before the European fur trade. So what happened? Where did they all go? Why have we forgotten this? Well, the fur trade happened, and settlement happened, and colonization happened. And that was absolutely catastrophic for beavers. This picture here of the beaver pelt on the hoop, that's me standing next to it for perspective. And that is from a very small beaver. And that was how much fur was taken off of it. And there are trapper records from the California fur rush showing that thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of beavers were taken out of California every week, every month, for years and years and years. It was a very intentional depopulation of beavers across the North American continent. Before the fur trade happened, there were somewhere between 100 and 400 million beavers on this continent. That is about 1 billion beaver dams. They were everywhere. This was like squirrels. Every single kilometer of stream, you could find beavers. But then after the fur trade, their population was down to about 100,000. We were that close to losing them altogether. This was a massive change in the number of beavers there, but think about that entire valley bottom that was being controlled by beavers. We lost that across the continent at scale really, really fast, just in a couple of decades. Now, thankfully, fur hats went out of style, beavers stopped being such a popular form of currency, and so with all of that luck and a few small policy changes, we've allowed beavers to start to come back. And today, the population is somewhere between 10 and 30 million, which is only about 10% of that historic population. So we did not do good by the beavers for the last couple hundred years, although beavers have been living in North America and building dams for 7.5 million years. So hopefully there is hope for us that they can continue to come back today. And I feel pretty confident that things are looking up, because there's quite a bit of beaver buzz lately in California. It is just news article after news article after news article. Beavers are helping prevent wildfires. The governor signs a beaver bill. The Tule River Tribe of California recruits an old ally in its fight against wildfire. Beavers. Yes, beavers can help stop wildfires, and more places in California are embracing them. You might think, okay, 3 articles isn't exactly a beaver buzz. How about 3 more? Beavers are our partners in protecting and restoring California. Spying on beavers from space could help save California. Believing in the power of beavers. 3 more. California aims to tap beavers, once viewed as a nuisance, to help with water issues and wildfires. The U.S. is bringing back nature's best firefighters, beavers. When it comes to fighting climate change, California says, consider the beaver. 3 more. Leave it to Beaver, nature's climate-solving hero. California shores up beaver protection in nod to their ecological benefit. California beavers leading the way in state environmental efforts. So there's an enormous amount of beaver buzz happening in California. There is so much positive energy here, and that is awesome because we need it. Some of us might even feel like beavers are our climate hero, to the point where there's documentaries now from PBS, a little bit of a full circle moment there, about beavers as a climate hero. So are they? Is this true? Or is this just a lot of hype? You can probably say just about anything on the internet especially, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's science and facts behind it. So are beavers really a climate hero? To answer that question, I want to talk a little bit about beavers and climate change. What's actually going on that relates something like a beaver, a gigantic semi-aquatic rodent, to climate change, a global scale challenge that we as a civilization, as a society, as a species are really struggling to deal with. There's a lot of disasters tied to climate change, and I don't have time to cover them all today, nor do I want to, because that's pretty depressing. But I want to talk about flood and drought and fire. And dealing with these 3 disasters is really linked because it's all about water storage. Now, in our stream without beavers, which I'm showing you here on the left, we have that simplified water channel, we have a narrow riparian zone, and then we have our stream with beavers on the right, and you can see there's those canals radiating outwards. We have the Beaver Dam, that big curvy brown bit across the middle. It's just a lot more complicated. There's a lot more vegetation. It looks more like a wetland. When we have a really big water event, now that could be a large snowmelt, that could be a thunderstorm, that could be an atmospheric river. I know we've had plenty of those lately. It creates a flood wave. And flood waves have a lot of power. This is a huge amount of water coming through our streams all at once. And when the streams are really degraded, when they do not connect well to their floodplains, as the name implies, that's where floodwater is supposed to go. If it can't get there, it's just going to rip apart the stream. You can think about this like if you take a garden hose and then put your thumb over most of it, but not all of it, the water goes from being kind of like a nice trickle to being really abrasive and kind of painful, and too much water in too small of a space. That's what's happening in our degraded streams. And it really does. It rips them apart, causes a huge amount of erosion. We see the banks collapse. We see a lot of damage. A lot of dirt and sediment moves. It's challenging. But when flood waves hit beaver wetlands, it's completely different. The water is a lot deeper. The water is a lot wider. The canals literally are piping water out onto the floodplain. They're preferential paths for that water to get from the pond to the floodplain, because it was originally supposed to carry the beavers from the pond to the floodplain, but it can carry water too. And so the flood wave slowly moves through this beaver wetland, and the power is kind of taken out of it. And it does make its way downstream. Remember, these do not stop the water. Beaver dams are slow, they leak, water comes through them, they're not stopping it altogether, but they're definitely taking it down a notch. And the end result of this is you have a lot less powerful flood wave going downstream. It's no longer quite so erosive, it's no longer quite so destructive. Instead of having just massive amounts of erosion and soil loss and scouring, like we do in the streams without beavers, instead we see water being spread out, slowed down, and stored. And that's really, really important. I want you to think again about our streams without beavers on the left, our streams with beavers on the right. Now, there's a lot of labeling here. What you really need to know is that in both of these images, I'm trying to show that it's raining. We've got plant roots going down into the dirt. The plants are green. They're getting water from above. In California here, our water table's pretty deep. If you go dig a hole in the yard, it's going to take you a while to hit fresh flowing water. And that's okay as long as there's water being stored in the soil. But when our streams are really simplified and degraded, it's really hard to store water there. It moves through too fast. It never has time to go out into the earth like a big sponge. Stream with beavers, because we have a wider pond, because we have that beaver dam, because we have all these canals acting kind of like little micro streams, it's super, super easy to fill up the soil with water. It's like the earth, the whole valley bottom is a great big sponge, and beavers just fill it right up. But it doesn't really matter for the plants as long as it's rainy and wet, because everything has water, and that's great. It's green, it's healthy, it's lush, until we have a drought. And we have droughts a lot. This is not like an every now and then kind of thing. It seems like droughts are every summer now, and sometimes it's years and years and years of drought in a row. When we have drought, what happens is we lose that rainfall from above. We lose the snowmelt. We lose the water coming in on top of the soil. And so all of the plants rely on water that's been stored underground. And when the rivers are degraded, when the streams are degraded, we just don't have that much water for them. And so they start to wilt, and they wither, and they dry up, and they die. Stream with beaver is totally different though. It was so good at storing water when it was rainy. The earth is like this great big full sponge. Those plant roots are slurping up water all season long. They don't even care if it's a drought. They're staying green. They're staying healthy. They're insulated from the effects of drought. And that is incredibly important when we have one careless match. Or a power line, it is California. Regardless of what's starting your fires, when you have a wildfire start, fire is going to burn everything it can. And what it can burn is stuff that's dry. And when we have drought stress to the ecosystems, when everything is sort of shut down and crispy and brown and crunchy, that's what's going to burn. And that's coming into our rivers. We are getting fire in the river bottoms, but not where we have beavers, right? Because the beavers have stored all this water. They've kept the plants green during drought. The plants never really dry up, and so they're always really hard to burn. This is a somewhat complicated looking conceptual model, but I think a lot of people would feel like intuitively it makes a lot of sense. If I asked you to come on a camping trip with me and we needed to start the campfire and I was like, hey, can you go gather some stuff to start the campfire? You would probably not go pick up the wettest leaves you could find and the greenest branches you could find, because you know that's not going to burn really easy. It's hard to burn it when it's all wet and alive. It's easy to burn dead, dry stuff. And that's exactly what's happening here. Where we don't have beavers, we are building up a lot of dead, dry stuff. It's easy to burn. But where we do have the beavers, it's wet leaves, it's green twigs. It is not easy to burn. And this isn't just a conceptual model. This isn't just something that we like to talk about. This is something we've seen. So these photos are from my colleague, Dr. Joe Wheaton at Utah State University, and they're from the Sharps Fire, which burned in Idaho back in 2018. On the left, we've got that stream without beavers. On the right, our stream with beavers. Now, you may notice that the hill slopes are pretty toasted in both of these pictures. That's true. Beavers are not working all the way up on the tops of the mountains. They stay in the river corridor. And so we did have a lot of fire on the edges. But there's another difference here that does matter. In our stream without beavers, the fire came down the hill slope, burned right through the river bottoms, right through the valley bottoms, across the floodplain, and back up the other side. When we have beavers, it's different though. The fire comes down the hill slope. It gets to the valley bottom, and there is a lot of water there. And there's a lot of green, lush vegetation there. And it is hard to burn, so it doesn't. It just stalls. And then eventually you get a gust of wind, a little ember flies over to the other side, burns up the other hill slope. But importantly, the whole valley bottom ecosystem did not burn. It stays preserved. And that matters a lot. If you are a little fish, or frog, or a turtle, or bird, or small mammal, or maybe a big mammal, or maybe a person, it can be really hard to escape these fires. Fish are certainly not going to be able to outswim every fire that comes through. I would be shocked if a turtle could outrun a fire, but they don't have to if we have beavers, because the beavers are preserving that habitat, that wetland habitat that 80% of terrestrial or land-based species rely on at some point in their life cycles. So they're doing a huge amount of good for us there. They're preserving this habitat. And this is something I wanted to study. So I am a scientist, I'm a professor, and I kept asking myself, like, is this something that happens consistently, or is this a rare phenomena? Like, are beavers maybe just occasionally going to protect the landscape from fire, but usually it burns through and it's not a big deal? I wanted the answer to that question. So I looked in 5 different fires across the American West: California, Colorado, Idaho, Wyoming, and Oregon. All of these fires at the time, I thought they were pretty big fires. I don't totally think that anymore. I'll come back to that in just a sec. But they were good-sized fires, and there was a good number of beavers within every single fire perimeter. And what I wanted to know are these beaver ponds and these beaver wetlands staying green during the fire in all of these different scenarios in California, in Colorado, and all the other states, in all these different ecosystems, mountains, valleys, etc.? Are the beavers able to keep their wetlands safe? And the answer was yes. And I wrote about this in a paper. I called it Smokey the Beaver, which was, I thought, great. Some of my friends in the Forest Service were a little bit like, but it was memorable, and that's what matters. And what I found was that in all of these states, the places that have beavers were burning 3 times less intensely than the places that did not have any beavers within them. We would have streams side by side, and the streams that did not have beavers on them would be completely burnt through all the way to the valley bottom. And the streams that did have beavers on them were fine. They stayed green, they stayed intact, they were healthy, and they were preserved. And it's not just beavers that use these. When folks were looking at this particular fire, which actually was one of the California wildfires back in 2000, the Mantor Fire, they were flying over doing their aerial surveys, and they saw this little black bear hanging out in the beaver pond, in the beaver wetland, fishing, eating, healthy, safe. And I really like this photo that they took because it speaks to the fact that what beavers are doing is not just helping beavers. It goes so far beyond that. It helps birds, it helps other mammals like bears. I also like this picture because it sets me up to make my favorite corny joke, which is that it looks like Smokey Bear got a little helping hand from Smokey the Beaver. Ah, wonderful. So at this point in my research career, I was pretty sure that I had just solved climate change and that we could be done and just like turn it all over to the beavers. They figured it out. But unfortunately, 2020 occurred, and 2020 was a tough year for a lot of reasons, one of which was it was one of the worst fire years we've had in a really long time. It was a wake-up call that we're in the age of megafires. And if you're wondering what a megafire is exactly, a megafire is a fire that has a burn area larger than 100,000 acres. Now, just because a fire is big does not make it bad. I want to be super clear about that. A lot of fire is really good. Many, many, many places in California need fire. What they don't need, though, is fire that is burning extraordinarily hot and extraordinarily fast. And they don't need fire that is creating these sort of self-sustaining extreme behaviors, like making their own weather systems. So when a megafire gets going, it'll make something called a pyrocumulus cloud, which is basically an ember and ash spewing cloud. Looks like a thunderstorm cloud, but instead of thunder and rain coming out of it, ash and ember comes out of it. And that can start little baby secondary fires that merge with your primary fire. And then you can get a pyrocumulonimbus cloud, which some folks will affectionately, or maybe less than affectionately, call the fire-breathing dragon of clouds. Now, these are really, really challenging things to deal with. And you've probably seen the effects of these in some of the viral videos that go around online and on the news. If you've ever seen a fire tornado, often those are forming in the same kind of fires that are making pyrocumulonimbus clouds. If you've ever seen a firestorm, where instead of looking like a blizzard with snow or rain coming in sideways, it's fire. Those really extreme events are characteristic of the megafires we're seeing today. And they have explosive spread rates. So we've seen fires go 100,000 acres or more in a day. That's a lot of burned area, and that's a lot for us to stay on top of. And when it burns that big and it burns that fast, it leaves these huge swaths of moderate and severe burning in its wake. And that's really difficult for us because when you have 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 acres of severely burnt area altogether, that's not good for the ecosystem anymore. That's the kind of fire that destroys habitat. And that's the kind of fire that we and beavers are up against. So that was a really grim slide. Sorry about that. But it did lead me to think about my next question, which is, do beaver-created fire refugia, or these patches, this ability for beavers to protect their wetland homes, does this persist through these really extreme fires? Or have we maybe sort of missed the bus on beaver and firefighting being hand in hand or hand in paw, depending on how you want to think about it? Hopefully this slide is a little bit of a happy spoiler for you in that we have a megafire and we've got beaver wetlands right up the middle and they're bright green. So what does the data show us? I looked at 3 megafires that burned in the Rocky Mountains in 2020 to answer this question. And it's not because I was partial to the Rocky Mountains or anything. California has definitely had more megafires, and so there is a lot of places I could have looked in California. But because there are actually so many fires in California, it was tougher for me to find and isolate places where I could really see the effects of the beaver and not the effects of like forest thinning or old burn scars or other things that might change its behavior. So these 3 megafires burned. They were all really big, like 200,000 acres-ish each. There were 1,000 beaver dams in one of them, 100 in another, about 500 in the third one. And they were really severe. So what I'm thinking is between the 1,500 beaver dams that I'm looking at in these 3 really extreme fires, I'll be able to figure out exactly when and where beavers can deal with extreme fire behavior and when and where they can't. But it kind of turned out that they can deal with it just about everywhere. So after looking at all these different beaver dams and all these different places, I found that as long as we're by the beavers, about 90% of that area is going to be fire refugia. 9 times out of 10, if you're standing near a beaver pond, it's not going to burn. That's very different than the rivers that didn't have beavers within them. Only 60% of that was fire refugia, which means that almost half of our riverine area is burning. That's way too much. That is not its natural fire regime. So that is like a little concerning, but glad that the beavers are still dealing with it. Outside of the rivers, though, we were seeing only 37% as fire refugia. So what this tells me overall is that the fire situation is definitely bad. Rivers without beaver dams are not super healthy. Rivers with beaver dams, even during megafires, that habitat is okay. And these patches are really important. So this is where the beavers live. This is the view you would have had from one of these beaver wetlands during a huge wildfire. It's green, it's lush, the water's cool, there's lots of plants and animals. And just a little bit further away, off on the horizon, you can see 70-foot walls of flame burning an entire forest. Beavers are powerful ecosystem engineers. They are absolutely able to control that landscape and to keep it safe, even during some of the kinds of disasters that challenge us as people. We struggle to fight fire sometimes, but beavers are really good at it. And they are worth a lot of money when they do it. So if you're not motivated by just how awesome it is that they can do that kind of thing, maybe dollar signs are motivating. So I like to bring this up. We used to think of beavers as a natural resource just because they have fur and we wanted to take their fur. But their value goes way beyond that. And when people went through and tried to figure out everything beavers are doing for us and put on a dollar sign to every different benefit they give us, from dealing with greenhouse gases to helping us with water supply to cleaning the water to fighting droughts and fires and floods and everything else, beavers are doing $179,000 worth of work for every square mile they engineer every single year. That's an enormous amount of work. That is a lot higher than my salary. So good job, beavers, for absolutely going out and crushing it. And that, to me, I think is really important for us to think about. We're not just, giving beavers space because it's all out of the goodness of our hearts. Maybe some of us are, and I think that's awesome and that's great. But sometimes we're giving beavers space and we're letting them do what they need to do because we need help and beavers can provide it. And instead of taking $179,000 in salary, beavers are providing $179,000 of work to us for free. So now what? That's where we come in. Let's talk for just a second about beavers and us. If you're thinking, okay, beavers are solving the wildfire crisis, amazing, we need them. What's the next step? Is it time for us to start airdropping beavers all over North America again? Yes, again, we did this. Idaho is famous for having done this now. There's all sorts of YouTube videos about the parachuting beavers where they stuffed beavers into airplanes and then dropped them in the wilderness. But it wasn't just Idaho. California did this too. And so we've got a little poster from California Fish and Wildlife here being like, hey, remember back when we dropped beavers into the mountains to help us with water? Oh yeah, we did that in the 40s and 50s. So this was a choice we made a while ago. I don't think this is necessarily the choice we need to be making today to support beavers. They're not, they are a water and a land animal. They are not an air animal. So there's other ways for us to work with beavers and help beavers. Step one, let's work with them. Let's compromise with them. Beavers chew on trees. They've got it. That's their building material. If we don't want them to chew, let's put a fence around that tree. We are also engineers. We can figure this out. If the beaver is flooding too much, maybe there's too much water on the road or the water starts to creep into people's houses or onto trails, we don't just have to throw our hands in the air and be like, oh, guess we have to move. The beaver has occupied my space. We can also engineer that pond. We can install pipes and things that help us take the flooding down just a bit so that there's a compromise. The beavers have a pond, maybe not as deep as they want, but it's still there. And we have that wetland. We have that benefit that they provide us. And of course, sometimes beavers are having a hard time getting where they used to live. Back before the fur trade, there were a lot less people, a lot less roads, a lot less farms in their way. And so now they have to try to get through that Sometimes it's a little bit too hard for them. So we can live trap them and move them. This is called beaver relocation or translocation. And we do it, especially in California. We've just started doing it again after taking about 75 years off. We dropped them out of airplanes and we were like, never mind, we're going to stop. And then we didn't move them again for 75 years, but now we've started once more. We can also mimic them. So we build beaver dams too, called beaver dam analogs, which Megan alluded to earlier. And this is basically us going out and trying to be beavers, which I think is just like the funniest thing, because a beaver goes out and it's just like a big water rat and it can do this and build these amazing dams. And we go out and we've got like our hydraulic post pounders and we've got a crew of like 30 people and we're just able to make a beaver dam. With 30 of us all together, which is not to say we're not good engineers. We are. But it is to say that beavers are incredible engineers. They have been doing this for 7.5 million years. So that's a big step. If you aren't super familiar with beaver dam analogs or river restoration or low-tech river restoration, it's basically trying to build back all of these structures that we lost when we lost beavers. We lost the log jams, we lost the beaver dams, we lost all of that. It's a lot of sort of work that needs to be done to bring it all back. And so we go out, we build some of that. It makes better habitat for beavers. It makes it easier for them to come back. It also makes the river healthier already on its own, even without the beavers there right away. And I'm just going to show you just a little snippet of something that I like to think about was in the case of wildfire. Do beaver dam analogs work the way that beaver dams do? I obviously think a lot about beavers and fire. And so I'm going to show you a site that was installed by Kevin Swift and Swift Water Design up in the Sierras and some of it a little bit west of the Sierras. And these beaver dam analogs get put into meadows to try to make them healthier, especially when it's not ready for beavers yet, or if there just aren't any beavers nearby. And there's a lot on this slide, but what you really need to take out of it is that I was comparing places with beaver dam analogs to places with beavers, to the hill slopes, to meadows that just like nobody had touched, not people, not beavers. And I wanted to see how they did during wildfire. And if the box is sitting in the red, then that area burned. And if the box is sitting in the blue, then that area didn't burn. And you can see that the beaver dam analogs area, it is pretty much not burning. A little bit is, you've got the whisker on that box kind of sticking up into the red, but most of it's sitting down in the blue. So most of the beaver dam analogged areas are not burning. Those beaver dammed areas, not burning. The meadows, kind of like 50-50. The hill slopes, really burning. So I'm feeling pretty good about beaver dam analogs. We're seeing them protect landscapes kind of similar to the way beavers do. If you look at this in satellite imagery, which is how I actually do most of my work, is looking at things from space, I've drawn this little bitty box around where the beaver dam analogs were built amidst this big burn area. You can't see a whole lot here. This is called a true color image. So it's like how our eyes would look at the landscape. But what we can see is when we switch into false color. So in false color, red means that the plants are unburnt and black means that they're burnt. And you can see there's just this little bright red jewel right in the middle, right where the beaver dam analogs were built. What that's showing me is that these beaver dam analogs, even when everything around them has burnt, are keeping that landscape green and healthy. We're doing a pretty okay job of mimicking the beavers. And it's not just the plants that are green, it's keeping the water on site too. So in this picture, red means there's not any water, and blue means there's a bunch of water. And within that burned area, there's very, very little water left, very little aquatic habitat, very little space for frogs and fish and beavers and everything else, except where we've gone in and built those beaver dam analogs. So no, we're not the beavers. We're not doing everything they do. We're not chewing on the trees. We're not digging the canals, but we are building the dams. And at least right now, it looks like we're doing a damn good job. So this is not an anomaly. This is not something that's just happened once. It's not lucky when the beavers protect a landscape from fire. It's not just a chance happenstance when we build a beaver dam analog and it keeps that landscape healthy too. Beavers are doing incredible work. They are really good at fighting fire. And the more we learn from them and the more we try to mimic them and the more we pay attention to the lessons that beavers have to teach us about firefighting, the better we can do. We see this over and over. We've seen beavers fight fire in California. We've seen it in Canada. We've seen it in Idaho. We've seen it in Colorado. We've seen it in Oregon. We've seen it all over the place. We've seen it in Wyoming. We've seen it in places with beetle-killed forests. We've seen it in drought places. We've seen it in flood places. We've literally seen this everywhere. And so this brings me back to the idea of beavers as a climate hero. A lot of people would say, like, I don't know, I don't feel like I can fully trust a 80-pound rodent to protect me from climate change. And that's fair. There's a lot of work to be done here. There's a lot of things that beavers are just not able to do. But what they are able to do is help us with those droughts, with those fires, with those floods. They do a really good job and they work so hard. And all they ask in return is for us to give them some space and to treat them with respect and to let them be beavers. So I hope that you think a little bit more about beavers as a potential climate hero, or if nothing else, a hard worker that doesn't take a salary. And I'm happy to answer any questions you all have about beavers, my journey, or what they're doing in the face of climate change. So thank you for listening.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Emily. Chat, can we give some love to Dr. Emily right now? I learned so much from you. I really appreciate how you just walked us through the basics to how they fight fires, how they prevent wildfires, how they create these intricate ecosystems that really prevent and keep our areas wet to prevent from more resilience from drought and flooding. And wow, give it up, chat. Like, you're getting so much love in the chat right now. Let's flash some comments up there. There we go. Thank you. So chat, this is your chance to type in your questions. I saw a few that I'll get to right now. But go ahead, and if you have questions, please type those in so that we can get to them. Here we go. Let's see here. So Veronica asked, do beavers get wet when they go in water, or do they stay dry like otters?
That is an awesome question. And it depends on how well they've been grooming themselves. So beavers constantly need to sort of re-up the oil on their fur. A lot of us try to get the oil out of our hair. Beavers are the total opposite. And they have these little split claws on their nails. And so they'll scoop oil and from their oil glands, which I'm not going to talk about where those are located. And then they groom themselves and they waterproof themselves, and they waterproof their family members, their brothers, their sisters, mom and dad, the babies. And if they're on top of that, then they stay dry in the water. If they're getting a little scraggly, or they're maybe skipping showers, as maybe some teenagers do sometimes, they'll lose their waterproofedness and then they can get cold. So they're not innately 100% waterproof all the time, but they can absolutely make themselves waterproof.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. We got a question here. Let's see. Are beavers able to work in steeper, more narrow areas or rocky areas, or do they need to have more of a meadow shoulder area?
Yeah, great question. Beavers, we've got these awesome models about beaver preferred habitat, where beavers are going to build dams, all of this stuff. And then beavers routinely, I think on purpose sometimes, go and build exactly where we don't think they want to. So we would think beavers want to have a lot of meadow area. It gives them more habitat. In general, they would, but they are happy to build on very steep rocky canyons. I have personally seen beaver dams where the canyon walls are this tight and there's hardly any shoulder and they just dam right across it. We have seen beavers build on up to a 26% slope. I can barely walk up a 26% slope and they're building dams on that. So they can deal with rocky and steep. When it is very steep, they're going to build more dams because they have to put in a lot more effort to control that faster flowing water.
Amazing. All right, two-parter here. How old are beavers when they start building dams, and how long does it take for a beaver to grow and build a dam? How long? So let's say the age to start building, and then how long does it take to actually build the thing?
Awesome questions. I think that any parents in the audience are going to understand this one really well, in that they try to start building as soon as they can get their paws or their mouths on anything that they can build with. So you can have little itty bitty baby beavers and they'll go follow right behind mom and dad. And I've got lots of videos of this on my game cameras. And mom swims by with this great big branch in her mouth, heading for the lodge or the dam she's going to build. And then little baby comes behind it like a fuzzy potato, and it's got a blade of grass. That's all it can carry. So do you count that as building a dam? I don't know. They're trying. They're doing their best. They start becoming productive members of the dam building enterprise when they're about a year old, and they can actually start moving real size materials. They're going to try helping from the minute that they're out of the lodge, but they don't really become effective for a little while. Amazing.
So I saw a question here from a 7-year-old. How do they actually make the dams and stick the wood together? Is there special glue? Do they use mud? Can you share more?
Totally. So they will drag a lot of the sticks with their teeth and they kind of like hoof it around like that. And then they pull it up onto the dam and they kind of lay it in a way that they think is going to stay on the dam well. And then they scoop up a bunch of mud in their front paws and they pack it on like that. So the mud is the cement, the sticks are sort of the structure. And then they'll also grab like weedy plants and leaves and things and kind of wedge that in, or they'll pick up a big stone and they'll set it on top. It's pretty chaotic, but they mostly just jam stuff together.
Nice. Okay, some sciencey questions here. Dr. Emily, does your research suggest that here on the peninsula we should be prioritizing BDA installation of beaver relocation first and foremost?
Awesome question. It totally depends on the site. If you have a place in the peninsula where the stream is super, super degraded and there's not a lot of habitat available right now, get some BDAs in, start that restoration process, get a little bit more of the water in the soil, build back up some of that creekside or riparian ecosystem so that if and when beavers do arrive, it's better. If you've already done restoration at a site and there's beaver food and there's beaver space, you really got to get the beavers in there. And I will say the peninsula is a tough spot for them to get into. They're pretty disconnected from some of the larger populations in the Sierras and in the Sacramento Delta. And so that's a really good candidate for relocation right there.
Nice. We got a beaver loving grad student in the chat. They've enjoyed your papers. They want to know what areas of research you want to see more of to help with, more beavers.
Yeah, great question. I think one of the most understudied aspects of beaver engineering, especially here in the States, is the flood effects. So we have like a couple of really solid studies on beavers and flood. A lot of work on that is happening over in Europe, actually, with their beaver. But seeing beavers, especially in the context of an atmospheric river or a flash flood in a dryland stream, so much space to add to the field there.
Awesome. Can you speak to the permitting process for installing a BDA? Do these work in inside stream channels?
I can. It's a nightmare. One of the reasons that beavers are awesome is they don't pull permits. So when you want to have things built in your stream, if people want to do it, the permitting can take a really long time. There's a number of programs in California to help sort of like cut the green tape and get through that a little bit faster, get the restoration happening, especially post-disaster. It's a lot easier to get these things in to catch sediment after a fire or help in those situations. But really, if you can get the beavers to come back, then you just skip the permitting altogether. And that's, I think, an ideal situation.
Nice. Are there places in California that they should be relocated to or helped along? Are there places that they are needed or used to live more than others? I know you mentioned a new policy change because for 75 years it wasn't real. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so one of the things we've realized looking at the beavers situation in California is that we have these pockets where the beavers are doing all right. There's a good number of them. The population's fairly healthy. This is parts of like the Sierra Nevada. This is a couple of spots in the Central Coast. But generally, the beavers are having a hard time moving around the state. They are not going to get up and walk on the roads. They're not going to get up and go over the mountain passes unless they absolutely desperately have to. They take the rivers. And 250 years ago, when they took the rivers, it was a straight shot to get from the Sierras down to the Mendocino coast. Not so much anymore. Now they're hitting farms, they're hitting houses, they're hitting roads, they're hitting people-built dams. And when they can't get through that landscape, we really need to help them. And I am probably very biased in this, but I think we really need to help them get back to the places where wildfire is a really serious threat. If we know that they're really good at helping us with things like drought and fire, we know that they used to live there and they're just having a hard time getting there, let's help them. It's not their job to navigate a beaver inaccessible landscape. That's something we can use our engineering for.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. We got a question from a 9-year-old here. Do beavers rebuild dams or do they build a new one every time an existing one breaks?
Beavers love to rebuild dams. They work smart, not hard. If someone's already done half the work for you, just add to it. There's actually beaver dams that have been largely unchanged and unmoved for over 150 years. And it's just different generation after generation after generation coming in, fixing it up, adding to it, changing a little bit. It's kind of like our own houses and properties, like families come and go, but the structure stays. Beavers would love for their structure to stay well beyond their own lifetimes.
Excellent. We got a question here from Jess. How do beaver dams affect fish migration or salmon spawning?
Salmon love beaver ponds a lot. So imagine you're like little baby salmon and you're trying to grow up and become a big fat adult salmon. You don't want to spend all of your energy swimming against super fast streams. So you're going to find a slow water environment. That's a beaver pond. We see lots and lots of young salmon especially spend their time in beaver ponds to get big, to get strong, and then they can head upstream or downstream, whichever way they need to go, pretty easily. Salmon as adults can jump over beaver dams. The canals that beavers dig, they connect upstream to downstream as well. Fish will take those canals all the time. And then a fun fact, a lot of people don't realize, fish about this big, like earphone thing size, they can go straight through the beaver dam. It's pretty leaky and pretty gappy, and so these fish are just cruising right through the structure.
Excellent. I'm going to ask, how can we encourage beavers to come to the Bay Area and surrounding streams, rivers, and waterways?
There's a few things. I would say first and foremost is education and like talking to people about beavers. There's still a lot of sort of myths about beavers, and people feel really nervous and weird about beavers sometimes. And when one does show up and tries to colonize or reclaim a landscape it used to live in, it's not easy. And sometimes people drive them away, or they harass them, or they try to trap them and get them removed lethally. So educating people about the good beavers do is probably the most important thing. Other than that, keep your rivers healthy. Get garbage out of them. Beavers don't like to live in trash. They will build with trash if they have to, but that's kind of sad. So keep the river healthy. Try to maintain that landscape so that when a beaver does show up, it can just settle there and stay. A lot of times they pass through the bay. There's a lot of, we call them like juvenile transient beavers. They come through, they're looking for habitat. Nothing's available, they leave. The goal isn't that we don't have any beavers coming through. We need to make them stop and stay.
Amazing. Folks, we did say this was a 75-minute webinar, so I'm going to take 4 more minutes of questions and then we'll go to our closing. But there's so many questions, Dr. Emily. There was so many eager beavers in the chat just waiting to pick your brain about it. So let's keep it going. Okay, so are there any endangered species in the Bay Area that are benefiting from beavers in the Bay?
Yes. There definitely are. There are a number of salmonids that are either threatened or endangered that are really benefiting from access to beaver ponds. We see this with some of the salmon that come up towards the Sacramento River, for example. They'll pop off into the Bay Area and North Bay beaver ponds that exist. Get big, get fat there, keep moving. We also see beaver ponds provide really good habitat for Southwest willow flycatcher, which is a type of bird. We see them provide really good habitat for a number of insects that are having a tough time, including dragonflies and fireflies. And I don't think the fireflies are in California, but they're definitely in New Mexico, another dryland ecosystem. And then also we do see things like wolves really love beaver ponds, and wolves are very sensitive, especially in California, and beaver is an outstanding food source for them. And in natural ecosystems, those would be a balanced species and be able to work together. The wolves also keep elk and deer out of the beaver ponds, which helps the beaver. So it's a great circle of life thing. That's maybe not the kind of benefit we always think about with beavers, but they really are keystone species. A lot of things depend on them.
Amazing. Can you share a little bit more? Elijah's asking about, do you know where beavers pre-trapping were common? Were they in the Sierra Nevadas, or were they also in the redwood forests of Northern California?
They were in both. They were in the Sierras, they were in the redwoods, they were in the deserts, they were in the mountains, they were in the estuaries. When they're in the redwood areas, they were not taking down like huge redwood trees with like 10-foot diameter trunks. That's a lot for a beaver. But one thing about river corridors and riparian zones is that a well-developed river corridor in the mountains is actually going to have a lot of the same species as a well-developed river corridor in the redwood forests. You have a lot more willow type plants, you have little cottonwoods and things, you have reeds and weeds, and that's the material that beavers use. And that's why you can have beavers in the desert just as easily as you can have beavers in the Arctic, or you can have beavers in the forest or beavers in the tundra. The river systems are all really similar. So they were in the redwoods, probably not in like obscene numbers, but they were definitely up there.
Great. All right, we got a lot of scientists in the crowd here. Olivia asks, can you talk more about your use of remote sensing? Is it primarily for studying an area after a fire?
Yeah, so remote sensing was a great tool for me and the kind of research questions that I have. First of all, because I don't start my own wildfires, I never know where they're going to be, and I can't necessarily have all my instruments out on site right when a fire starts. So having satellites up there, it kind of is like having my instruments everywhere. I can look down immediately as soon as the fire starts and start taking data. Additionally, fires are unsafe, as you might imagine. So when there's a raging fire, I'm not going to go walking in and like start taking photos of the beaver wetlands, because that's not a good idea. And so satellite data really lets me kind of do that without endangering myself or members of my team. it also lets me see things at a huge scale. A lot of people might see one beaver pond resist a wildfire and think, okay, cool, whatever. But when you see 1,000, 3,000, 5,000 beaver ponds resist wildfire, when you can look at spatial scales that huge, that's incredibly powerful. And that's what remote sensing lets me do.
Amazing. It's so interesting and powerful what technology can provide for us. We have a lot of questions about just interested in your academic background. Like Michelle here asked, why did you end up choosing geography as opposed as for your doctorate versus environmental science? But also, a lot of people want to know, how did they also start an academic career in studying beavers?
Yeah, great questions. I think that I am both like an interesting case and also a pretty typical case of someone in the beaver world. My undergrad degrees were actually in physics and chemistry, and then I did geology for my PhD, and then I now work in a geography department. And I joke it's because I can't decide what field I want to study, but really it's because beavers are so interdisciplinary that you can come at it from all these different backgrounds and still find a place for yourself in the beaver science world. I have colleagues that used to be economists on Wall Street, and now they do carbon credit counting and things like that for beaver wetlands. I have colleagues that used to be mathematicians, and now they model water flow. I have colleagues that are wildlife biologists. I have colleagues that are artists, that are communicators, and we're all working in the same space because in a healthy beaver wetland, there's beavers, there's water, there's plants, there's dirt, there's rocks, there's people, there's policies, there's everything. So really, you can't choose wrong. You'd have to kind of actively avoid fields that can relate to beavers. So many things relate to beavers. You have a lot of options.
Amazing. You heard it there, folks. Lots of ways to get involved. I think I have a two-parter here. I can't find the original ones, but one person was asking if you publish any live streams to your trail cams to watch about beavers, or where they can find more of that information. And then the other one here was, could you recommend any extra resources like books or lectures or talks to learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. We don't have live feed on our trail cams because it's expensive to do a live feed. But we do put some of those videos on our social media. And with our new Instagram page, we're going to start posting, especially over the winter, some of our game cam footage from this past year. So remember to check that out. And then in terms of other ways to follow along and to see cool things happening, I would say that there's really great books out there right now. Eager by Ben Goldfarb is a classic. Saving the Damned by Ellen Wool is a little bit sciencier version, but definitely it gets into the details in a really understandable way. There's tons of great beaver books. And then you can watch the documentary that inspired me. It was called Leave It to Beavers, and it was on PBS. And I'm pretty sure you can still find it from PBS. Yeah, there's a lot out there. And once you start going down that beaver spiral, as I call it, you never know when you enter your beaver spiral, but you start reading a beaver book, then you watch a beaver documentary, and then there's a beaver webinar like this one. And then at some point, you're like in the bottom of the spiral and you look up and you're like, when did I become a beaver person? But you're so far into it, you can't crawl back out. You're now just officially a beaver person.
All right. Last question. Dr. Emily, what is one thing any of our viewers tonight can do to help help this cause of introducing more beavers, or at least supporting our beavers in the fight against climate change?
Great question. I will selfishly ask that everybody use things like iNaturalist to like log when you see a beaver. We're still trying to figure out where they do and where they don't live, especially in California. So take those photos, put them out there, let people see them and try to figure out if it's beavs or not. Super helpful. And then keep talking about beavers. They have had to overcome a lot of bad PR. Like they are a giant rat. That's a real thing. And people sometimes don't like 110-pound rats. And I get it, sort of. I don't really get it, but I understand. So, talk to people about beavers, share your information and your knowledge, and just keep the momentum going. They really need our support emotionally and to not get in their way.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry, chat. We can't get to all your questions. Thank you so much for all the great questions that you shared. There was a lot of questions about where to find or if there are beavers in the Bay Area. Dr. Emily mentioned the beaver heat map. If you look up beaver heat map iNaturalist California. You should see it. We'll also include it in the follow-up email. But I just want to do a quick lightning round. We're running out of time, but just of all the things I learned. So if you didn't catch everything, here's what you need to know. But beavers basically are nature's ecosystem engineers because they transform rivers to make them more complex, to reduce flooding, more drought resistance, as well as combating wildfires. A whole family can make 5 to 15 dams, and many families can transform an entire valley. They even make freeways and dig canals to make their jobs a lot easier. Beavers' wetlands help alleviate flooding. They make them more resilient to climate change, less erosion, less scouring. And you've been able to prove that they beaver riparian corridors burn 3 times less, which is amazing. And they provide almost $200,000 of ecosystem services for free annually, which is amazing. So what we can do best is to work with beavers, encourage them, but also engineer where we don't want them. And beavers are amazing, not just in California, not just in the Bay Area, but all across the country. And beavers are basically our unsung climate heroes. So Dr. Emily, Chad, thank you once again for being here. Before we say goodbye to you, is there anything else you want to say?
Yeah, if you want to stay in the loop, definitely check out my website. It is emilyfairfaxscience.com. And also give us a follow on Instagram at Fairfax Beaver Lab. We are about to go into the field in like 3 days. So there should be some new posts of all of us tromping around beaver wetlands, sharing our facts.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Emily. Let's smile for our picture. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Awesome. It's been such a pleasure to have you on our show. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Bye, Dr. Emily.
Bye.
All right, chat, but don't go anywhere. Wait, there's more. Just a few more on the last announcements. If you like this event, you might like our other events. We host free community events like Raptor Fest happening in person November 16th at Rancho San Vicente in San Jose. And then if you want to join our next online webinar, that's going to be in January, on January 9th, online. And that's going to be the top 10 mushrooms of the Bay Area featuring Christian Schwartz. You might recognize him from last year from Fungi Fundamentals. Well, we're bringing him back for another series on mushrooms. And if you like this event, check out our other ones. We do hikes, walks, in-person and online events. If you don't want to volunteer with us, go to openspacettrust.org/events. We also publish free field guides online if you want to look for wildflowers, if you don't know where to go hiking, or if you have a dog, check out our field guides at openspacettrust.org/field guides. And last but not least, we want to know, did you like tonight's event? Let us know your feedbacks by scanning that code with your phone or clicking the link in the chat to fill out that survey. Let us know how you liked our speaker. Please feel free to suggest other topics so that we can bring that to you. My name is Megan. It's been a pleasure to be your host for tonight, and I hope to see you online next time. Thank you. Good night. Fill out that survey.